Hello there. Today we're going to live with a very special topic that was brought to me by the one and only Stella. Stella is a person with FND and a huge advocate. And a lot of folks ask Stella questions, and she's got really great answers. So I'm going to invite you in here, Stella. To join, and we're going to go live with Stella today to talk about functional neurologic disorders and how to know if you're ready for neurorehabilitation. By the way, as I bring on Stella, my name is Julie Hirschberg. I'm a neurologic physical therapist, the owner and founder of Reactive Physical Therapy and Wellness. I'm in the Los Angeles area, and I get the great pleasure to meet many, many wonderful people. Meet her, hear her story, and if you've got questions, fire away. Stella is the absolute queen of so many of these topics. Hi, Stella.
Hi, Julie. How are you?
I'm good. I see your water and I'm immediately jealous and I'm grabbing my water. Um, because I tend to get like a dry mouth. So um I'm excited to chat with you, Stella. And this was like your idea, I have to say, because you get a lot of questions, right?
Yes, I get a lot of messages specifically through Instagram, and I've been getting messaged a lot about how I knew I was ready for rehab and how I knew I was ready to go cross country for reactive.
Yeah, because it's not for everybody and not everybody's ready. And I'm glad you said that because I think that's a good intro of like why we were even doing this is that you're getting asked questions, we get asked questions, and I think no better than the person herself to share them. So how like and maybe for people that don't know you, Stella, maybe you can introduce yourself and just a little bit of your story and talk about how you knew you were ready.
hmm So I'm Stella, and I am a FND warrior, and I have been for about 3 years now, a little bit over. And about 2.5 years into my journey, I got the amazing opportunity to go to Reactive, and spend 6 weeks there with my parents doing the neuro intensive rehab program for FND. Um, it was a major life switch for me, and after going to rehab, I'm now living the life that I wanted to be living prior to rehab. And it was not always like that, and it was not always going to be that I was going to get help and be in the life that I wanted. Um, I was not always willing to put in the work, but when you're flying cross country and sacrificing, giving up your life for 6 weeks, you become willing to put absolutely everything into it to make it work.
Yeah. And how did you know, Stella? How did you know that you were ready?
I knew I was ready to go to rehab when I had the mental switch of strategies versus solutions. And Julie's put it in her post a couple of times, but it's something I really live by, and I started to live by before even going to rehab, but it was really enforced through my team at Reactive. Uh, I'm not looking for a cure. And when I came to that realization that I don't need to be cured, I need to know how to live with my disability, uh, that's when I knew I was ready to put in the work. When you have the idea that you're going to go somewhere and some other person's going to put in the work for you and cure you, you're not ready because you need to be able to put in the full commitment. And I knew that when I went to reactive that I was going to need to put in all the work, and that I was going to need to do everything from rehab outside of rehab as well.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, I interviewed Diane yesterday and she said this. She's like, I get better when I do the work, right? And it's like, it's so very true. Sometimes the work is actually rest, right? It doesn't mean you're doing like high powered, like running and jogging every day. It might be that you're actually like pacing through the day, right? So when
Yeah.
you say work, what do you mean by that?
Um, I mean, being willing to adjust your life, uh, and being willing to make accommodations for yourself. Like you said, work doesn't mean physically doing something, but a big part of my physical therapy was learning how to take breaks and when to take breaks and learning how to understand my body. And I'm still struggling with it. This morning, my dad was on the phone with me and he was telling me, save your spoons, save your spoons, save your spoons. Because I was wanting to clean absolutely everything in the house, not because it needed it, but because my mind was going crazy and that's what I wanted to do. Uh, and I'm still practicing pacing and still practicing taking those breaks. But that was a huge part of reactive, and I had to learn how to take breaks outside of rehab too. I had to learn how to listen to my parents and to my family and how to understand that just because someone's suggesting a break to me doesn't mean I'm doing something wrong. It doesn't mean I'm failing. It doesn't mean that I need to be done with the activity. But maybe I need to check in with myself for a minute, and that's okay. That's just how I'm going to live my life.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, like to have these skills that you're building now, Stella, like I didn't have these skills at your age. I will tell you that. So, like having that, so a piece of it is kind of this mindset of like, I'm not going for a cure or for somebody to fix me. It's not like a medication that you just take and you're miraculously better, but you're learning life strategies like and you're learning about your brain and body in a way that is going to kind of carry with you for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I also gave, or I don't want to say gave up, but I also realized that I didn't need to continue to be on this journey of what's the reason,
Mm,
there needs to be a
mm,
cause, I need to find something more. And when I came to terms with, okay, maybe it is that I have a invisible disability. Maybe there really is nobody that's going to show me this picture of this is why you have it. Uh, and when I came to terms with that, that's when things started to shift in my ideology of disability. When I was looking for things deeper than that, I never really got to connect with the title or the disability label, because I was always telling myself, this isn't what I have, so I don't need to connect with it yet.
hmm Yeah, yeah. And I think of this, Stella, like with any other neurologic disorder, like let's say somebody got diagnosed with ALS or MS or Parkinson's. I think regardless of the diagnosis, people are going to ask, like, why? Why did this happen? And want to figure it out. And for most neurologic disorders, we don't fully know how it happens, right? And so that can be an endless spiral of appointments and doctors and lots of things without any answers at all. And it can really prevent you from living. And it sounds like you kind of came to terms with kind of moving forward and learning to live rather than trying to figure out something that was maybe impossible.
Yeah, I stopped trying to find reason in everything and just started to accept, okay, this is a thing, so what can I do differently in response to it? I realized I can't change my surroundings and I can't change what happened to me, but I can change how I respond to it.
Yeah, that is huge. As someone is saying in the chat here, Shira, I really like this reframe. I recently had to come to terms with not getting answers. And while I haven't seen a shift in symptoms yet, I've seen a huge shift in my outlook. That's really incredible. And I wonder if you can speak to that shift that that you saw, and maybe if that like you see and talking to other people too.
I would say that I didn't see this big shift in physical symptoms right off the bat, but I saw a shift in my energy and my motivation, and
Mm,
that's equally as important as feeling good in your body, because if you're mentally feeling in a better area, you're going to be in a better state of mind to continue on to do things. And when you're angry all the time, you're not wanting to do things. And for my 3 years of having a disability, I've almost always been in some sort of rehabilitation. And for the first 2.5 years, I was reluctant towards my disability. I was reluctant towards not having answers. I was reluctant towards the fact that nobody was going to give me something or do something to just fix this for me. And those therapies never really stuck. And I don't think I had bad therapists, and I don't think I had bad doctors, but I think that we were not on the same page, and I was not in a place where I was willing or ready to accept what my life was, and I was not in a place where I was willing and ready to put into the work.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think that like readiness to change, readiness to try new things. I think you're speaking to all of that. Now, you came across the country. Like we're on opposite coasts right now. We're in different time zones, but I love seeing you, Stella. And what that is really scary for a lot of people. What kind of got you ready, and what advice are you sharing with others that might be looking to travel or just uproot their normal daily life to do things?
Yeah, so a big part of going cross country is how are you getting there?
Mhm.
And I've gotten this question from people before, specifically a beautiful young lady who's on her way over and hasn't ever flown before. Her mother's never flown before, but drives are long, very long, and exhausting. And uh, I was asked what my advice is on this, and the funny part is test drive. Like, actually test drive. Go for rides in the car and figure out what works for you in the car. And if you have the ability to go on a train or find some other form of transportation, not necessarily for going somewhere, but just for the fact of learning and experiencing new transportation, makes it easier when you do go to the airport for the very first time. Um, I practice going on trains to come see my sisters, but even if I hadn't had that opportunity, my dad would have gone on trains with me just up and down the state, just so I could experience this is what it's like to travel on my own. This is what it's like to travel with an animal. This is what it's like to travel with a disability, to be in a handicapped seat and have people look at you and be like, you don't look handicapped, and I'm like, oh well, you just wait for some turbulence and you'll see it. um it's very scary to do it alone for the first time, and even with another person, it's a very intimidating feeling, and to learn tips and tricks prior to being at your destination and going on these literal test drives to experience what works for you and figuring it out prior to when you need it. It helps a lot. So I learned things like butt cushions, or packing like goodie bags, so that I have a snack goodie bag, and I have a fidget goodie bag, and I have an activity goodie bag. And yes, I travel with a lot of bags. My dad does call me the bag lady, but it's okay because that's just a part of me, and I love it, and I'm all right with it, because anytime somebody says, "Hey, do you have this?" Yeah, I probably do.
I love that. I'm total bag lady too. And like, let's just face it, the airport and airplanes are a massive sensory load, right? There's a lot of people, a lot of sounds. People are moving quickly. You're in a rush. You're going through these high stress situations. And like having some tools, like you said, like your goodie bags that can help regulate you, even like before, right? Before, during, and after. That is so very important. There's a great question um, coming here. Moon Mind Mess. I love people's Instagram handles, by the way. They're great. Did you struggle to accept that you needed treatment? This is such a good question, Stella. Sometimes I try to convince myself I can stop my symptoms and I don't need intervention or help.
Yes, to this day, I still get times where I'm in denial and I convince myself, oh, if I just stop taking my medications or something, like what's really gonna happen? Like, I'll be okay. Um, and those moments are really, really hard because they're your body's way of telling you that you're exhausted and that you're looking for a break. They're not, it's not a big red flag that treatment doesn't work. It's just a sign that you're looking for a different relief from that treatment. And maybe that means taking a break, and that's okay. Um, I definitely was reluctant going to appointments, and that is a mix of many things, but definitely that I didn't want to put in the effort and energy because I didn't feel like I was seeing results. So what was the point? Uh, and that's really difficult. But when I learned that results aren't measured in a number, they're measured in an emotion and in a feeling, it changed a lot. I stopped looking at, okay, my time on the treadmill, it changed, or I got through this many sit-ups, or I did this long in the plank. And I started thinking about, wow, my back didn't really hurt too bad when I was doing that plank today, or wow, I'm feeling pretty good even though I walked for a little while on the treadmill. And I started to think about how I felt and about how my body was doing. And that changed a lot for me. That made it a lot easier for me to digest and process how treatment was going. Because even when you've put in all this work, you can have a flare where your uh, results look very similar to day one, and that can be really, really, I don't even know the word. It feels like a punch to the gut,
Yeah.
and you're like, what is the point? Why am I doing it? I have the same results as day one. But flares happen, and that's okay because your results a couple days from now could still look just as amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that was well, and I just want to thank the Moon Mind Mess for the great question. Because in a lot of neurologic disorders or chronic disease, we're going to see an up and down. And I actually saw you in the clinic. I think we met, Stella, the day you were having a flare. And we don't try to instigate a flare, but we actually are pretty happy when they happen. Not like we're celebrating, but it means we get to work through it together. We get to figure things out. And actually, I was teaching with my colleagues from Boston this past week, and one of them in the presentation said, like, if a person never flares their symptoms, I'm actually concerned that they haven't learned enough tools to go out into like the greater world and to try a lot of new things, because it just kind of almost worked out too easy. Having that flair, and I think, would you say this, Stella, like being ready for rehab means kind of like not fearing the flare, but just kind of being open to what it might teach you.
Yeah, so that's another really good point that's been brought up to me before of people being nervous for their therapist to experience their symptoms. Um, a huge part of that typically comes from medical trauma of experiencing symptoms in front of doctors and not being believed. And so to be with a therapist that understands, and to have that rapport, to have that relationship with them is really, really important. I work as a behavioral technician, and as I would say to the people that I train, it sucks to see our kiddos having bad behaviors, but we're the people that are going to fix those behaviors, and we can't fix them if we never see them. So, while it sucks to have flares while you're with your therapist, they're the perfect people to have a flare with. One, they know what's happening in your body and they know how to respond to it. Two, it's a perfect time for you guys to practice strategies, not solutions. They're not going to sit there and try to cure why you're having that flare up, but they're going to sit there and think, how can I make your life a lot easier during this flare up? And that is a huge, huge piece in rehab and in post rehab, and in the process of giving yourself sympathy and compassion and allowing yourself to have those breaks and whatnot. Experiencing flares with your therapist is incredibly important, and I can't stress it enough.
It is. I know it seems counterintuitive. And here's your mom here because she was there that day I met you too. And she says there's something beautiful about coming to a place that truly understands what you went through and did not balk at any of your symptoms. It was so validating. Stella, I didn't know you were in a flare. Like I was just like meeting Stella, right? And I had no idea. But we work with folks like Stella all of the time. And I think that's certainly something to kind of think about where you might be going to. And Sadie said, great perspective on flares, especially working with practitioners. Yeah, and I would say this for the clinicians too. Don't fear the flare. Like it is just data. It's just information about things. It's going to happen and it's going to allow you to figure out things together.
Mhm.
Um, so now, another part that's often really challenging is transitioning back, right? So you had 6 weeks, we had so much fun, and you did so many great, like Southern California things. But then you have to transition back, and that can be really challenging. I wonder what you learned and what advice you have for people.
So a huge part about why I chose reactive is because of their advocacy for their after rehab help, and letting you know that you're not alone. It was one of my biggest fears, was that I was going to do this big giant move cross country, 6 weeks, give up a bunch of my life, and it was all going to be for nothing, because I was going to go home and fall right back into what I was before. Reactive made a huge promise that they wouldn't let that happen. And so working with a program that is going to help you set up an at-home therapy routine is really, really important. Not only did I get to leave with a list of strategies, but I got to leave with a list of doctors and recommendations of uh, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the word, of rehabilitation centers in the area around me. Uh, I got to leave with information packets about each and every one of my disabilities, and how mental health plays a factor into it, so that psychology connected into all of the different disciplines. And that was huge. If I hadn't had that, it probably I probably would not be doing as well as I'm doing. 6 months later, I still use those papers. I spent time with my father and my sister a couple weeks ago, and we edited them so that they were more up to date with my current lifestyle, now that I am settled into a different kind of life. And I wouldn't have ever thought to like have these papers prior to going to rehab. And it's really weird to think, yeah, I live my life by some documents that I create on the computer, but I do, and it works for me, and that's okay. And I get to label them, and I get to make them pretty, and I get to show them to people, and it makes explaining my life a lot easier too.
I love that. I love that. It's like you've created this little workbook of strategies and things that help you live your life. And like we all could use that, Stella. I want mine to be pretty and labeled too. Now that I wonder if you could share too, like so you flew over, and a lot of people ask, like, what was it like? Like, where did you stay? What kinds of things did you do outside of rehab? And I know you did a lot of fun things. So I wonder if you could share a little bit about the like outside of rehab aspect of being in rehab.
Right, so going cross country and not knowing where you are and anybody around you, it leaves a lot of time for exploring. And that can be really hard when you have a disability and you need accommodations. We only had about a month between when I found out I was going to reactive to when I started. But in that month, we looked at a lot of different options of where to stay, and we talked a lot about what the each option held for us. And that was really huge and really important, including like the location and the distance from the clinic, and what the rentals or Airbnbs had to offer. You'd be shocked at the places that don't have elevators. And if you're gonna be on a third floor and have a disability, you don't want no elevators. It sounds very intimidating to get your bag up the stairs. um, I also, you know, when I when my mother and I were scheduling our airplane tickets, she did surprise me on my way there, and I got to go first class, which was absolutely amazing. And I didn't find that out until I got to the airport, but it was such a cool experience. Um, but for our way home, we picked out our tickets specifically for to be near an exit row. Which a lot of people try to avoid, but that's a lot of leg room. And when you have seizures, whether you're short or tall, that space is very valuable, and makes it a lot more convenient for you and your neighbors. Which is another huge factor, is you have to think about the people around you and how you're going to approach that. I got the experience to fly home a couple weeks ago, and I sat on the plane with a very, very nice older man, a little bit larger, and so he's close enough that we're touching. And I felt the need to inform him that I had tics, and that if we're gonna be touching like that, he might feel my elbow like jab at him, and that I'm not like trying to push him away, but that I have a disability. And he was very nice and accepting, and it opened up conversation, and we ended up talking the entire ride. But that's okay. It was great to make a friend. And I would have never like learned to advocate for myself like that in travel, had it not been for rehab. But it's a really huge important part of traveling, is advocating for yourself, letting the person driving you know, hey, when you take turns like that, it's giving me a lot of vertigo and things like that. And advocating for yourself is really, really hard, even if you know the driver.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's like such a skill and like important to even like practice it. Um, yeah, I feel like wow, like your dad is saying you fly alone now. I think this is really important because I think a lot of people that I meet can't imagine that they could live on their own, that they could fly, that they could be back to work like you, and you, but you can manage your symptoms. It's not like you're living with nothing happening. You just know what you need to do in those situations,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, and another factor about it, in a hard piece to get your mind around that I've been struggling with a lot recently, and actually work with Mike in therapy on, is paying for your sickness. None of us asked to be sick, And uh, that's really, really hard when you have to pay for everything when you're sick, including the rehabilitation and including the travel to get there. Um, it's incredibly frustrating when the best and only amazing clinic is across the country and I can't find treatment in my own state. And I have no choice but to learn how to travel so that I could get treatment. That can be really frustrating. It can be really taxing. It can be mentally exhausting, and it can make it really easy for you to want to give up. And when I say paying, I don't just mean money wise, but I mean energy and effort as well. You have to sacrifice a lot and be willing to give up a lot. And that's really frustrating when none of us asked for this. None of us wanted this. But in order to live our life happily, we have to be willing to put in this energy and effort and pay this tax of life. And it's really important to have a team that's going to be with you to pay that tax of life with you. My parents don't have a disability, but I'm really, really, really fortunate to have such amazing parents that support me through the entire thing, and they can be equally as exhausted as I can, which at the beginning I would get frustrated about. I'd be like, I don't understand how you can be as exhausted as I am. But when I realized how much they were supporting and how much they were holding on their own shoulders, it made so much sense to me. And to feel exhausted with somebody, I know it sounds crazy, but it feels so much better to feel it with somebody than to feel it alone.
It does. Anything not alone, for sure. And I'm glad you brought up the financial aspect because this is a big question people have. Like, doing rehab, it's a financial investment. It's investment of your time and energy, your family, as you said. And, you're out on the other side of it, so you're like, it's worth it. But there's pieces to it, right? So like you're submitting things to your insurance and getting reimbursed and stuff like that. So I wonder if you could open up some like windows for folks of like what does that process look like or
Yes,
what it looked like for you.
putting in your research before going is really important. And understanding how insurance works is also really important. Insurance can be really, really frustrating, and they're not always willing to cover things. And so understanding how reimbursement works and understanding how total bills work is important. And if you don't have that understanding of submitting the the bill and the report from the clinic to your insurance and getting reimbursed from it, it can be really scary because you're sitting there thinking, how am I going to get all this money? And that's really, really hard. Um, it's also important to understand where you can get help. And I was asked by a couple of people if I ever started a GoFundMe. I personally never had to start a GoFundMe, and I'm very fortunate for that. But I'm aware of people in situations that are not as fortunate. And Reactive has an amazing program, a scholarship program that you can apply for and receive help to get treatment. And there is a beautiful girl whose name is Bella, and she is also an advocate and shares her story with Reactive. And you can see her on Reactive's page and on her own page. I'm not positive the name, but I want to say Dancing with Bella is the name of her page. And they got help from Reactive, and it changed their lives for the better. And they now live in California, and Bella and her mom give back to the community in every way that they can. She makes like little stuffed animals or toys or something that she brings to the hospital for kids experiencing medical conditions. And she pays back to the community, and the community paid up for her, and it was 100% worth it. She can open her eyes and talk to her sister now and has a relationship with her family, and had the reactive scholarship program not been there, that treatment would have never happened. And so thank goodness for Bella's mom, who was willing to reach out and advocate for the help that she needed and was able to find out about the scholarship program and apply for her daughter.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, and as your mom said, we are fortunate it was expensive. We would 100% invest in Stella's future if we had to do it over again, 100%. And, and this is a part I really care about for people is that the way we set it up is that folks do therapy. We provide them all the documentation for it so that they can submit to their insurance, and some insurances cover 10%. We've had a few people where it covered 100%. So knowing your insurance, knowing what you might get reimbursed after the fact is really, really important. And we do some of the investigation for people to try to figure that out so people can make a wise decision. But unfortunately, the way US healthcare is set up, it does take you really kind of figuring that out with your insurance, because they don't necessarily make it easy for you to do. So you and I'm glad you mentioned the scholarships too. So we work with a nonprofit where if folks have a financial need, we can apply for a scholarship that can partially cover things for people. And we also run a sliding scale pro bono service with our interns and doctoral students as well, so that some people with no funding can have access to care. So that's kind of in addition to the scholarship too. And that's something I really feel is important, because it can be hard to find a specialty clinic.
Mhm.
Um, and by the way, we're trying to educate the world so you don't have to fly across the country, the added expense of that. But it's a slow process. But I think there's a lot more people out there in the world that understand some of these more complex neurologic disorders and chronic disease. Um, so where I'm curious, are there any other questions, Stella, that people are frequently asking you? I know we talked about, like, how do you know when they're ready? What about flares? The financial part? What about travel, transitioning back? Are there any other things that people typically ask you?
Um, I've gotten asked about equipment and tools and what is it like to go there and leave with a lot more than you're expecting. I definitely left with a large duffel bag more than I arrived with, but that's not a requirement. That is an optional thing. I chose to order the equipment as I was learning about it and experiment with it at home too. Um, but you can also wait until you get home to order those things. I did pack a lot to live in somebody else's house. I know that I have my own pet peeves and my own preferences on how my living area should be, and living in somebody else's house was really, really hard. And so to have things that provide you comfort and
Mhm.
remind you of home, to provide you things that have the same satisfaction of like cleaning your house, but not cleaning your house.
Yes.
um, those things are all really, really important because it makes your stay a lot easier and a lot more comforting than as opposed to not having anything that reminds you of home.
Yeah. I want to say, because of your input, like, you've kind of helped us develop some of the resources that we have for people when they come. So we're moving in April to a brand new space, and we have started putting together not only like the places to stay, the accessible Airbnbs, but like the fun things to do. I think you had suggested, like, what if somebody wanted to get their nails done? What if they needed a haircut? Like some of those things, and having some, we've actually had some really wonderful people say, hey, I bought a wagon while I was here so I could carry stuff to the beach. So now we have the reactive wagon for other people to use. But that was started by you, Stella, really advocating for future folks to really feel like they're at home when they come for rehab.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's really important to understand your areas and the accommodations around them. And I was there for 6 weeks and got to do that experimenting. But there's some people that only go to reactive for like 2 weeks or less than, and don't have that time to figure it all out and then still experience it all and enjoy it. And so why not share the knowledge after I've already figured out what's accommodating, and why not have other people share as well.
Yeah. See, I feel like you found all the good ice cream and like all the fun places to go. You took me to the best ice cream place too, also in Baltimore. So thank you. That was so good. I'm up for ice cream in any city. So I think that's so incredibly helpful. And maybe just because has it been 6 months, Stella? Is that right?
Yeah, just
Yeah.
recently, which feels so crazy to me.
Wow. And I know in that time you have helped us teach one of our weekend courses, right? And we have a couple more coming up. I'll be reaching out to you, Stella. But where are you now? Just for people to kind of know, okay, it's 6 months later, what might things look like for me?
Yeah, so 6 months post rehab, I still have my strategies. I still have daily presences that remind me, hey, you still have a disability. But my mental health and my physical health have both improved dramatically, even since leaving rehab. I
Mhm.
live a completely different life than what I lived prior to going to rehab. I had lived with my parents in Connecticut, and I was supported a lot by them, like throughout my day and throughout my daily activities. I now live with my sister in Virginia, and even though I still live with a family member, I'm not cared for as much as I was at home. Well, I mean, they still care just as much, but they do not take care of me as much. And I live a lot more independent. I live a lot more independent with a lot more accommodations. Like I have a walker, and I have a floor dog bed, human-sized dog bed to sit on instead of a couch, so that I don't fall off, and that's okay, and I love it, and it's so comfortable. So my life is apparent that I have a disability, but it's not different or bad because I have a disability.
Yeah. And you're back. Well, shout out to Chloe, by the way. I think she joined us. I just want to say hello. And you're back to work too.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
I do. I work, and that was huge, especially the conversation of disability at work.
Mhm.
Especially when you work in a field where you care for other people, and when you explain your disability, people quickly are like, "Well, you can't care for yourself. How do you care for other people?" And so I worked really hard with reactive on how to explain the accommodations I need, and how to explain that I don't always need accommodations, and that that made a big difference. And I love my job, and I've advocated for myself plenty of times. I've had meetings with them plenty of times, and it's felt really empowering every time I have had a meeting with them. And you know, it's always intimidating to people when you go in and you talk about, well, the ADA, and start stating laws and stuff. But you got to do what you got to do in order to get the services that you need or to get the accommodations that you need. And advocating for your rights is really important. So, familiarizing yourself with the ADA laws in your state is highly important when you go back to work. Um, Familiarizing yourself with what is allowed and what's not allowed for disability is huge because people at work might think they know, but it's important for you to know your facts because people will try to take advantage of the system.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. And just like life skills there for sure. And your whole family is on. They're like chatting with each other in the comments here, which I love. Your dad says something suppression breaks. What is that?
So I take suppression breaks. Specifically, I love myself a suppression break Sunday. And suppression breaks are very, very important for making it through your days. A suppression break is time where you allow yourself to not suppress your symptoms. A lot of times people try to fight off their symptoms, especially when they're going through daily activities like work. And so I do a lot of fighting off symptoms, which can make other symptoms increase, and that can be
Mhm.
really hard. So having times where you specifically allow yourself to not fight and allow symptoms to happen at will is really important for your body. It's not giving control to your disability, but it's allowing your disability to be a part of your life. And that's okay, and that's important, and that makes your body a lot less tired.
Yeah, yeah, I think of this a lot in the world of folks with autism who need to unmask, right? And actually move and do what is needed. It's actually allowing your body to do what is needed through the day. So I love that. I love that you've learned that about yourself. I'm like here with my fidget and I'm standing on a treadmill so I can do this interview. We need to acknowledge that like we need these things throughout the day, right? And
Hmm.
I think learning that and knowing that allows us to live really fully. So gosh, Stella, you're so articulate with this stuff. And every single time I talk to you, I feel like I just like want to write it all down. And I'm glad we're recording because I'll go back and listen because you're just dropping knowledge left and right.
Thank you. I
I'm
appreciate that.
so very thankful for you. And somebody else is asking here, any advice to help accept doing so? I feel like I'm putting on my symptoms or not grounding myself deliberately. Any advice to help accept doing so?
I think they're referring to suppression breaks in this, and I apologize if I'm understanding the
Hmm.
question wrong. But I think that it wasn't easy. It was like I said, I worked really hard in physical therapy on doing breaks, and breaks are really, really hard, including suppression breaks and accepting that it's okay to make time for yourself. It's okay to make time to let things out. And it's not like I sit there and I'm like, okay, have a seizure now. Like, I just sit there and I relax and I allow my body to feel.
Hmm.
And if I don't have symptoms in the moment, then that's okay. I don't have symptoms in that moment. But I've allowed myself the chance to take a break from fighting it. And it, it was it was easier for me to accept the idea of allowing disability to take over my life like one day a week as opposed to seven.
Hmm.
And that made the process of accepting suppression breaks a lot easier for me.
Yeah. And someone else said, let yourself feel that it's hard. And I love how you said, like, I could let myself feel in the moment. And if you're a person that, like myself, who has not let themselves feel things, or maybe as this person is saying, like, to accept this, maybe it's been hard to accept that you deserve the care and support and compassion from yourself or even from others. And it does to put some of these pieces into place. It does take, like, I gotta say, I had to do a lot of therapy myself in order to accept help or accept love or accept supporting myself, right? And so I also just want to give folks, it's okay if that feels hard. It can be really hard. It could be like maybe you feel like that's really selfish of you to do, right? Like I had some of those beliefs about myself too. And it's a process. This process didn't just happen in one day for you, right, Stella?
Correct, and I definitely felt at first like it was putting a lot of work onto another person by allowing myself suppression
Mm,
breaks. But when I
mm.
realized that it might require a little bit of assistance from my sister or something on that day, it provides a lot of saving throughout the week from drops and from attacks and from really hard episodes. It allows for episodes to sort of be a little bit easier to
Yeah.
manage.
Yeah, because you're taking care of your nervous system, your brain and body all the time. And people are just dropping knowledge bombs left and right. Shira says it's so hard to give yourself space to acknowledge that your life isn't going to look the way you expected and that your needs have evolved. Oh my gosh, isn't that true? And someone responded, so true. It's so much easier said than done, but you cannot move forward if you don't meet yourself where you're at. So well said. You deserve to give yourself the extra time and extra space, I promise. And just as Stella said, giving that actually allows you to not only live, but you're managing bigger amounts of symptoms that way because you're taking care of yourself moment to moment and day to day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
think of
Wow.
your if you think of your symptoms as like a junk drawer and suppressing them is just throwing things in the junk drawer. Eventually your junk drawer explodes and you can't close it anymore, and that's when these big giant flares happen that are too hard to overcome. So by cleaning out your junk drawer every now and then, once a week maybe, and allowing some of those symptoms to come out on their own, it really helps.
I have the worst junk drawer right now, Stella. Like, I'm just like, oh, it needs a refresh. So good. Wow, what a great analogy. I love the junk drawer analogy. Everybody has a junk drawer, and it needs some regular maintenance. Oh my gosh, Stella, this was so great. Thank you so much for
Thank you
sharing
so much.
your wisdom, what you have learned in this process, and just really advocating for other people in this space. Like you're just doing incredible things.
Thank
I'm so
you,
thankful
as
to know
are
you.
you, and thank you so much for sharing your story with us last week.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, Stella, until next time, because there will just keep being a next time. I love chatting with you so much.
Goodness.
And yeah, we'll see you again soon. Thanks again.
Bye.
Bye.